So two after, we'll go ahead and kick it off here. Hi everyone, welcome to our 2023-24 season. Glad to have you all with us here. Obviously, we're doing a few new things this year. So first is the change of time. It is not dark out for a change. We're kicking it off during the lunch hour. Second is trying new venues again. I know last year we started off with UTA in North Texas Center of the Council of Governments, and we're going to switch between them this year and hopefully the Weather Service for a few meetings. So this will be great. So glad to have you all on board. So real quick, introduce officers. So I'm Stephen Martinez. I am your president. I work for OU and NSSL. I've been with them for 14 years, but I reside here in North Texas, and I will be, manning the helm again. I don't know if Craig, if you're online or not. Yes, no.
Let me look. I don't see him.
Okay. When Greg shows up, Greg Higgins, he is our vice president. Dave.
I'm David McAnally. I'm the secretary.
And Stanley.
I'm Stan Christmas and treasurer, and I retired out of here in 1999.
Yeah. So those are your officers. So let's get right down to business, and that is Mr. Tim Marshall, also a member of our group. So he is a forensic engineer and meteorologist with Hog Engineering. He's got various degrees in geography, meteorology, atmospheric sciences, and civil engineering at Northern Illinois and Texas Tech. And he is well renowned for his work in storm surveys and civil engineering. He's known for all the surveys you've done, and with tornadoes and hurricanes. He's part of the National Weather Service Quick Response Team for 20 years now.
More than that.
Yeah, more than that. Yes. And the reason and the purpose for his talk is going to be talking about the work he's done as part of the EF committee, one of the various committees that he is on. So I will now turn the floor over to Tim.
Great. Thank you so much. Great. Thank you for everybody being here today as well as online. Good showing, it seems. So I'll get right started here. Well, everybody's familiar with the EF scale. It started after Fujita's passing by Texas Tech engineers that decided it was time to upgrade it. So in 2001, they had a meeting in Grapevine, and a lot of people showed up for that. And they selected 6 people to do what's called an expert elicitation, which is to try to guesstimate failure wind speeds on various types of buildings. And that's how it all initiated. And then in 2006, the first document was written by several people. And then in 2007, the National Weather Service adopted the EF scale, and it has been utilized ever since. Well, in 2015, 3 groups got together and decided that it was time to upgrade the enhanced Fujita scale. And that would be the AMS, American Meteorology Society, the Structural Engineer Institute, SEI, and then the American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE, really headed by NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So that's kind of the short of it. So next slide.
It changed here. Let's see.
It's
not changing up there. Let's stop share and share again.
All right, technical difficulties.
That's okay. It happens.
Let's kill a program or two and see if that's causing it. Nope,
there you go.
It's just being slow.
That's fine. So the EF scale, why do we rate tornadoes in the first place? It's a lot of things. The National Weather Service obviously has their mission to document the track, width, path length, intensity, but it goes far beyond the National Weather Service. I was involved in a number of projects with actuarial insurance groups to determine risk levels. If you're going to be building anything from a school to a hardened facility in the center of the United States, there's actually a risk associated with getting hit with a tornado. And in one particular project I was involved with was near Manhattan, Kansas, where they were building a very critical facility that could not be breached by a tornado because of some very nasty things that they were doing there. And so anyways, of course, Manhattan, Kansas is the perfect place to put a very critical facility with nasty things in it, okay? But what the problem they had was the initial design was for EF3. We know tornadoes are stronger than that, but for every level above that, it's $1 billion. So we're talking about some hard dollars here to harden a facility. And basically, we were looking at designing a hardened facility within a hardened facility. And that would cost many billions of dollars to do. But if you want EF5 level design with all the things that come with it, like flying cars and flying telephone poles, then you're going to need to have those billions constructed into that because of the nastiness of the chemicals that they were working with inside this facility. So wind engineers at Texas Tech initiated the EF scale project, and it was funded by NIST, still is, to some extent. It called for a steering committee, and then we all met in Grapevine to discuss it. Next slide. So it was actually March 7 of 8, 2001. There were 20 invited participants. Out of that, 6 people were selected to develop the wind speed ranges. I was one of those 6. The idea was to develop a set of damage indicators, DIs, which are different kinds of buildings, because not all buildings are built the same, as we will find out. And then for each of those DIs have a degree of damage, increasing from nearly 0 and 1 all the way up to maybe 10 as a level of damage, with various degrees of damage increasing on that number. And still the EF scale, 0 to 5, just like the original F scale, developed by Fujita, Dr. Fujita, who, by the way, was from the University of Chicago. I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, Oak Lawn. I first met Dr. Fujita in 1974 after the super outbreak, and he provided a lecture to our AMS student chapter, NIU. So he went down to the University of Chicago. Were you there too, Greg?
Yeah, I was with you.
Jeff Hedges was there? Yeah. Okay.
I drove because some didn't have driver's licenses yet.
So it shows you how far back we went. And really, one of the greatest satisfying things of my life has been, I was in the audience as a kid listening to Dr. Fujita give a lecture. And 15 years later, I was up giving a lecture on tornadoes, and in the front row was Dr. Fujita. So it turned about there. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing to see that. And he was very helpful to me and inspiring me. I asked him if he could send me some of his colored tornado maps that he had drawn up. He sent me every one of them. It was amazing. I asked him about the downburst book that he had. He sent me an autographed copy of it. So just wonderful guy there. But he was a workaholic. He would work all the time and publish 1 paper a week. It was amazing in his life. Next slide. So I think everybody's familiar with a EF scale. It has 28 damage indicators. In fact, we even have some trees on there. And this is still used today on that. But the updated version is going to go in here and really do a number on that. So we're going to have in the new EF scale update, there's going to be 30 DIs. So there's going to be 2 more. But within this table, There's going to be some combinations. We're going to combine them, and there's going to be some separations, and there's going to be some deletions of some of the DIs involved. Just to give you an idea, DI1 is small barns or farm outbuildings. That stays the same. DI2 is 1 or 2 family residences. That stays the same. And of course, residences are the vast majority of what we rate. However, number 3, the manufactured home single wide is going to be combined together with the double wide. And in place of 3, what we're going to have is the concrete masonry style homes that are typically in the southeast, like Florida. You don't see them as much around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and you see them in the southwest as well. And then there's going to be a whole host of other changes that you'll see later on. Next slide. So basically, each damage indicator has several degrees of damage, and from 0 to total destruction, and arranged in increasing order of severity. The DODs are a function of wind speed, so the failure wind speeds are a 3-second gust at 10 meters above the ground. Now, why that? It's because the standard anemometers in the country for most of our observations are 3-second gusts at 10 meters above the ground. 3 seconds is because of the response time of the anemometer. 10 meters is just the baseline out at airports and sites to record wind speeds. The regional F scale was based off of a fastest 1/4 mile, and so there is some adjustment to be made for that. So the expert elicitation is there because we don't have hard data from every building type on how it performs. It'd be great if we have anemometers outside every building, but we don't. So we have to have some way of filling in the gaps. You know, one of the Jurassic Park movies uses a little frog DNA, and that's what we kind of did. Used a little bit of frog DNA to come up with some wind speeds. It's just based upon some experts and what they thought it would take to fail a building. Next slide. So the EF scale, and you've seen it, it has, in this case for residences, the DODs from 1 to 10, 10 being the most destructive home destroyed. And it has 3 columns in there, EXP, which is the expected wind speed, LB, which is the lower bound, and upper bound is UB. Now, why the 3 different ranges? Okay. The 3 different ranges is because of the variability in construction. Not all buildings are built the same. There are fatal flaws in some buildings that make them fail. For houses, there's 2 critical areas that we see failures a lot of times, and it's where the roof is attached to the top of the wall. Typically, that's a toenail. Works great for taking the load of the roof down, but when you reverse that load, it does not perform very well, and off goes the roof. Another problem is where the walls are attached to the foundation. Typically, you need to have every board as strong as each other in terms of where it's connected, but that isn't always the case. The weak link there is where the studs are attached to the bottom plates, and that's typically a straight nail connection. Works great for taking loads downward, but when it's reversed upward, doesn't do well at all. So that's why we have the ranges. Next slide. So there's a more description about the expected upper bound and lower bound. So the key for the surveyor going out there is to recognize those critical anchors, braces, and connections that would have held the building together. So you have to know something about how buildings are supposed to be built in the first place. You have to kind of know a little bit about the building code. It's typically a minimum for the center of the country, and a minimum would be a 90-mile-per-hour 3-second gust. That's typically what buildings are. Now they call it a 115-mile-an-hour ultimate, which is not quite the same, but pretty close to the 90. It's just an averaging time difference. But that's what buildings are mostly constructed for. Which doesn't sound like a lot when you think about it. 90 mile per hour, I mean, is that your goal? The odds of hitting that are pretty small. So we don't see buildings and built very well to tornado winds. I mean, 150-mile-an-hour tornado wind, even minus the debris, still wrecks most buildings. Next slide. So looking at the little differences here between the Fujita scale and the converting the 3-second gust and then on to the EF scale. So you see that some differences there, especially as you go higher with the numbers, the 4s and 5s especially. It does not take a 300-mile-an-hour wind to destroy a house completely. And that is really one of the reasons why the engineers at Texas Tech, who I worked under, it's my alma mater, wanted to change this scale because of overrating. And overrating a tornado with its wind speeds makes for higher insurance rates and all that. If you could bring those down a little bit with some reason for doing it, then it's more closely aligned to actually what occurs. Next slide. So the EF scale still uses the concept of wind speed damage correlation. And it's looking at the damage and then coming up with a relative wind speed to fail it, rather than just obtaining the winds from Mach 1 to Beaufort 12, which is what Fujita did to try to rationalize his F scale. His F scale was to fill the gap between those two scales, and he decided on 12 increments for some unknown reason, but he decided that was how he could justify his scale, which, by the way, it was in 1971 when he developed his F scale, and it didn't become popular until that next decade, and it wasn't actually in peer-reviewed science literature until 1981. So it took about 10 years for the Fujita scale to become into the science itself. But Fujita didn't want to wait that long, so he decided to publish his own SMRT papers in the 70s, which is his own personal stuff, because he was tired to see the slow process to get a peer-reviewed paper. And not everybody agreed with the F scale initially, just like everybody doesn't agree with the EF scale. So the wind speed ranges are assigned the degree of damages, and then the tornado is still assigned the worst rating based on the worst EF scale damage rating. Next slide. So there's positive and negatives. Yes, it's subjective still, okay? But if you have a little bit of knowledge about what you're doing, maybe it'll be a little more accurate. Sometimes on the higher ends, you can be off 1 plus or minus on an F scale, the EF scale. EF scale is applied to DIs, especially houses. Houses are the most common, of course, and it can be more complicated. In fact, the updated version of the EF scale is going to be even much more complicated. So it's going to be up to the training and to modify the toolkit accordingly. EF scale has limited use. Canada has their own version. Japan has their own version. And then the European countries have still the F scale. They like that still. And the UK is a little different. They have the Toro scale. So more and more, though, we're getting input from our friends in Canada and Japan, as well as Europe, about how to make the EF scale here more universal, not just the US. Next slide. So one of the big problems with the EF scale is to try to recognize those fatal flaws in the building construction and houses. Well, I'll just kind of give you a little bit of background about, well, what happens if you get a metal building? What do you look for there? And then how do you address tornadoes in open country? I mean, that's a real big problem, still is. And for all those people who are figuring out risk, they want to know the intensity of a tornado in open country. The more accurate that you have that nailed down, the better off their models are going to be. And that's a tough thing. So some of the new DIs that's going to come up here are irrigation systems and grain bins. Some of the rural areas, we are going to have new DIs with these. Vegetation, can't do it yet. Road pavement, it's very subjective there, can't do it yet. So how to incorporate these other building types in the future, and what we think about it is this EF scale is an open-ended scale. It's going to have another revision every 5 or 10 years. This is a work in progress. However, this update process has been very taxing for me. I didn't have gray hair when I started. and now you see what happened. This started in 2015, and I thought it was only going to be a 2-year project. The simple thing was, Tim, we got to redo these tables and we got to redo those bullet points. Okay, well, that's simple to do. Let's do that. And then, hand in the back of the room says, no, you got to write a commentary for every DI. And that means reference material. That means photographs. I mean, that in itself is a dissertation. Where's my dissertation? It's my degree. So it's like, and it took years. The original EF scale document is under 100 pages, right? The new EF scale document is going to be close to 500 pages.
What? I quit.
And you gotta know all of it.
I gotta know all of it.
Yeah.
I didn't want my cheat sheet.
Well,
And
the
it's
part-
something more complicated, not making it easier.
no. My part that I have co-written with my committee, subcommittee actually, is 335 pages and counting. And then that's going. I have spent thousands of hours on this. I didn't realize it was going to be so involved, but it has been involved. But the good thing is, the longer we delay this, the more damage surveys we can incorporate into it. So, when we've done that in the last 20 years, we've had a lot more damage surveys, and we're doing that. But it is a very slow process because we have at least 80 people, scientists, on this committee. And to get 80 scientists or chefs in the kitchen to agree on anything is really difficult to do. I mean, we're arguing sometimes over whether a hyphen is needed between this word and that word, and then we have to take a vote. And sometimes, but a lot of it is substantive, and that's good because it's going to be a standard. When it comes out, it will literally be a law. Next slide. So it started in 2015. And it's been working on it ever since. I do see a light at the end of this tunnel, though. We are done with pretty much with the 30 DIs. We're still working a little bit on some tweaking here and there. And there's other sections they're going to have. They'll be on radar and in situ measurements and how to use those in the rating system. And those are other subcommittees that are working on those. We hope that it's going to be done within another 2 years, maybe a little optimistic, but I certainly would like to do that because I'm trying to retire and hand the reins over to someone else. But that's been a very difficult thing to do. So now we're going to have a commentary with references, updated photographs. That's all going to be within the new updated ES scale. And we had 31 DIs, but highway barriers didn't make the cut. So highway barriers are going to be out of it, but we're having irrigation systems, grain bins, yes, vehicles, and churches, which are now called religious buildings because churches is actually, it's not a building, it's a congregation. So we have to have religious buildings. So next slide. So kind of the working draft, this was in 2021. It's definitely been different since that time. Instead of 300 pages, it's now about 335 pages for our section that my subcommittee is working on. But the whole document will be over 500 pages guaranteed on that. So the original ES scale document was 111 pages. So this is going to be probably in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 times the thickness of the original EF scale document. And yes, then there's going to have to be training modules for that. And yes, the DAT's going to have to be updated to do that. So it's going to be still a work in progress. Next slide. So here's the new DI list. I mentioned a couple of these here, like DI3 is concrete block stucco residences. And then we've combined DI4 single or double wide. DI5 is still apartments, but then DI6 is concrete apartments. DI7 is going to be passenger vehicles. Yes, we're going to have passenger vehicles involved in that. And then small general buildings, farm silo buildings are going to be grain bins in there. So you see some differences there. Religious buildings, number 13, I'm working on that. Classic architecture religious buildings, which are the big sanctuaries. And at the bottom there, you can see DI29 pivot systems and then wind turbines. Thanks to Jen and working on we got that in and through wind turbines. Thanks to Jacksboro, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Next slide. All right, so if you remember what a few slides ago, we had those maybe 8 or 10 bullet points on residences. Look at the bullet points on the new EF scale for residences. It's massive, but then we divide it into typical resistance, stronger than typical resistance, and weaker than typical resistance. So those have been relabeled from expected upper bound or lower bound to these now. Next slide. Remember the old table from the EF scale. This is the new one for wood frame residences. A lot more discussion, expanding this table with more descriptions. Also now, the building damage is going to be separated into 25% increments. That was my deal, to try to have an incremental amount of damage to it from roofs and walls, coverings and that. And then instead of having single-digit wind speeds, because we're not that precise from the scientific standpoint, we're going to have rounded up to 5 miles per hour. Actually, there were some people that wanted to round up to 10 miles an hour, but that's a little more coarse than the scale would allow. But right now, it's 5. Next slide. Now, something new, a commentary. I have written most of these. These are very detailed descriptions, not only of the building itself, in this case residences, but then to go ahead and use the body of literature that's out there and to reference to get your numbers in line. I mean, just to come out with a bunch of numbers is one thing, but you have to justify it, right? This is going to be not only a scientific document, but this is going to actually be a standard. So you've got to have every reference vetted and justified. If somebody went out and did a survey and rated a tornado a certain amount based on a certain level of damage, and they came up with a wind speed, well, we can use that involved in this case. So here, new photos. A lot of them come from my library that I have. I've been on over 100 damage surveys. I have over 30,000 images. Granted, they're not as well organized as I wish they were, but we are using some of these in the new and improved EF scale. Next slide. So with the different levels of construction, I wanted to at least show you from the standpoint of wood frame residences how to recognize that. For the house on the left, that's your normal or typical construction where you have wood frame home on a slab and this green board, which is like a cardboard, insulated board that's used. And of course, it has no impact resistance, really. You can throw a board right through that stuff. On the right, above normal construction, this is in Moore, Oklahoma, where they have a stronger code now, and they're solidly sheathing homes, which is much better because that'll do a little better at resisting impact and missiles. And then that also locks in the frame where we have the roof wall connection, where we have the wall bottom plate connection, and that locks it in as a box. So it's a stronger home. So that's how to kind of tell the difference between something that's just typical on the left and something that's a little better built on the right. Next slide. So looking at the current ASCE wind load map, this is the way it works. For the vast majority of the country, it's 115 ultimate, which is at the very, very top, which is about a 90 mile per hour, 3-second gust. That's still about what it is. But you'll notice a lot more lines along the coast. Why is that? Well, that's the hurricane zones. So just because a house is built in the hurricane zone, it should conform to a higher standard. That's not always the case. And to assume that it's built better is not a good assumption. You see a lot of buildings built a long time ago and they didn't have good construction techniques. And this came out to really to a head back in 2002 with the La Plata, Maryland tornado, because they had houses that were completely wiped and they were going to rate them 5. And it's like, well, let's take a look at how they're built. And they were built just as poorly as houses anywhere else. And so they had to come on down. So to me, they weren't more than a 3. And that ended up to be somewhat controversial there. And it's because you think that in a hurricane-prone area, you'd have a better house, but that's not always the case. And we found that out also in Andrew there's a couple subdivisions there that houses were obliterated there. Wooden framed houses obliterated by Andrew. Yes, it's partly due to the wind, but also partly due to the poor construction. I mean, there were houses that did fine and after Andrew. The same for Charlie. Next slide. So a little bit of the construction here on the left is normal construction, where you would have a bolt every 6 feet. No plate should have 1 bolt. They should have a minimum of 2. You need to have a bolt within a foot of the corner. And then that's in red here. And then we have the toenail, or the actually straight nail from the wall stud to the bottom plate. And that's where the failures usually occur with F there. Below normal is when you use shot pins to shoot down the plate into the slab, and it's with a gun, actually. You load a pin in and you shoot it through. And part of the problem is when you're dealing with a house in this detail, you're dealing with 2 trades. You're dealing with the framer and you're dealing with the person who pours the foundation. Those are 2 totally different trades. They don't talk to each other. So, you think, well, the guy who pours the foundation should put in the anchor bolts. Well, they don't know where the walls are going to go. And when they do that, I saw that bolts are in doorways. They didn't know. They just stick bolts down, and now they're in a doorway. What do? You got to cut it, bolt off. So that's a real problem with different trades having to do this, but they're very important to have them talk to each other. And maybe have a set of construction plans, but most houses don't have that detail. Next slide. So on the left, normal construction, toenail stud, and then a shot pin with a square washer, versus on the right. Look at the difference. This is a SP connector from Simpson Ties. It grabs the stud, so it's not able to wobble back and forth. And the nails or screws are in sideways. That's a very strong connection. Versus on the left, you can pull that out very easy, maybe 100 pounds. On the right, to pull that out, about 1,100, 1,500 pounds. 10 times the resistance, just between that and that. Amazing difference. And then, of course, the bolt, that's standard issue on a bolt, but that bolt has got to be in the middle of the plate. A lot of people don't do that. They put it on the edge of the plate. Or they cut a notch in the plate. And then it has to have a nut and a washer. Now, I know that seems like really simple stuff, right? You have to have a nut or a washer. You just can't have a bolt. You got to have a nut or a washer. But I have seen thousands of homes without the nut and the washer. There's the bolt, but there's no nut or washer. It doesn't make any sense. And, of course, the code doesn't detail it. It just says put bolts every 6 inches. Or 6 feet, rather. And it's like, well, where does this say in the code to put a nut and a washer on the bolt? It doesn't. It doesn't. That's just supposed to be common sense. When you go to one of the hardware stores and you pick up an anchor bolt, guess what? It has 3 pieces to it. The nut, the washer, and the bolt. Why leave the nut and the washer off? Excellent. And then up at the top, normal on the left, toenailing to the plate. On the right, again, this is screwed in. Hurricane strap is called, but it's just a metal clip. You can see it goes to both top plates and the rafter, and it's actually, again, trying to shear that connection. Shear is much stronger than tension, so shearing it by having the fasteners there sideways. You can easily pull out the connection on the left again, about 100 pounds. On the right, about 1,100 to 1,200 pounds to pull that apart. Big difference. Next slide. So looking at the original EF scale, this is a house in Richardson, Texas. This is from our Dallas tornado. We have the roof that is mostly gone. We go through that table there. You can see it has 2, 4, 6, 7 bullet points versus like the 40 we have now. And then there's the EF scale, and you can go down there and rate that accordingly. So next slide. So here, number 6, large section of roof structure removed, most walls remain standing. That's a 122. That's how it's done. Pretty simple. It'll be the same way with the new EF scale, just a little bit more detail. Next slide. Here we have a house that's completely gone, pile of debris. But then we look at the perimeter of it. This is also in Dallas. And it's like we have a cut nails around the perimeter. I don't know if you've ever tried to hammer a cut nail in a concrete, but it's really tough to do. Unless a good way to build up your biceps, I guess, but it's really tough to nail in the concrete. And if you've ever installed carpeting or pulled out carpeting out of the slab, you notice we leave these little divots like we have there in the little inset there. And that's what happens here. This house was poorly built from the get-go. Yes, Dallas has a building code. Yes, Dallas has a building inspector. This should never have been built like this. But somehow it gets built like this. How does that happen? But anyways, it's very poor construction. So you go to the next slide. And you see here, all walls, DOD 9, but it's a lower bound, 142. Probably wouldn't take that either because of the poor construction. So you see how that level of construction comes into play here, and it's just recognizing those fatal flaws that do that. Next slide. This is one of the sliders. Now I know sliders from being in the Chicago area and White Castle hamburgers. We call those sliders. Okay. All right. So that's I use that slang term from the get-go, and so I've been looking at sliders, and we had to have a DOD for that. So that's what DOD 5 is. It's a slider. But look at this is in Parkersburg, Iowa. So look at the foundation, just a bunch of hollow blocks. This house was not anchored down. It was sitting on a bunch of block. All right, next slide. So there we go, the lower bound, and we're talking about 103, and then we have, of course, the roof on 104. So pretty close. Somewhere in that neighborhood is what we're talking about. Yeah, that's right. Only a little over 100 miles an hour can take out a house like that because it's not anchored. Next slide. And of course, manufactured homes. We have to deal with these, and unfortunately, the manufacturers of the homes don't install the anchors. That's a third party. I have gone through some of the plants here in Fort Worth. They build those homes very well. Those boxes are very well done. However, they're not responsible for anchoring. Well, you got to have a good anchor. You really do, in order to keep them there. Otherwise, they do this. They just simply roll right over. Look, going to the left, there's a mailbox still there. There's a power pole there. Trees still there. Going on the right, you can see power line in the background still there. Just rolled over. The tires were taken off when they installed it. Very low winds to do this. Next slide. Now, manufactured homes aren't built to the same code as what our houses are. They're built for a HUD code. Well, that's different. You have 3 different zones there. Zone 1 is 70 miles an hour. So that's lower than the building code. And then you have normal and above normal strapping. And then, of course, how deep you go with your attachment depends on your soil conditions. How many anchors do you use? Also depends on your soil conditions. This is not an easy thing to do. And yeah, they have zone 3 in the hurricane-prone zones. So that's really asking for trouble. Next slide. And there's different anchors. Look at the different kinds and lengths of anchors that you have here. And these are for soft soils, okay? They're an auger anchor, and they have a stabilizing plate. So you put the anchor in on a slight angle, you put the plate in vertically, and then as you tighten it, that rod comes up and bears against the plate. That's the stabilizing plate. A lot of times we don't see the plate being used, or the straps that are used are all corroded. It takes about 10 years to corrode them. And so what you think is an anchor home, 10 years later is not. Next slide. And here's what I just talked about, how to do it. It's installed in that slight angle, and then as you tighten up the strap, it comes in and bears up against that stabilizer. Next slide. And there's a soil test probe kit for those guys who go out there and test the soil and see how deep of an anchor do I need to go. Next slide. And then how to ratchet up, make sure that those straps are tight, not loose. Next slide. And then it has to go around the I-beam there. And there's a buckle, and you want to make sure that buckle is secure. Next slide. So here I'm in Pitcher, Oklahoma, and I'm going through this manufactured home park, and lo and behold, lots of devastation, destroyed trees, destroyed manufactured homes, and then I see something dangling up there. What in the world is that? That is a different kind of anchor. It's a rock anchor. It's only for rock soil. Oh, it's rocks, rocky terrain. But this was an area of soft soil. So, wrong anchor. Next slide. Here I'm holding it in the palm of my hand on the right, and all it is two tubular steel tubes there with a rod, and then you just do the old cross rods into it. Now that's good for rock, but it doesn't do very well for soft soil. It pulls right out, obviously, and it did. So that wasn't much of an anchor when I can go around and see these things. Wrong anchor, not anchor. Next slide. Breaking of straps. You can see on the right where it actually was tugging a little bit on the strap and it finally broke. Anchor held. Next slide. And then corrosion. That would fall into a lower bound then because of its corroded. Next slide. So we get back to our EF scale, the original one. We have a manufactured home that slid off its blocks. It's also got roof damage. There's our DODs. Where do we go from there? Next slide. All right, so here, this house had been attached properly, but has a complete uplift of the roof. So expected wind speeds about 87, 89 miles an hour. Next slide. Here we have a large isolated retail building. We've got some of these around the Dallas area that have been hit. The one on the left, I think could be Dallas, right? On the right? Yeah, left and right, Dallas area. Seen a number of these buildings get hit. These are precast tilted wall panels with steel trusses for a roof system, and then the decking acts as a diaphragm to hold everything together. So you want to keep the roof decking. If you lose the roof decking, then you lose the top end support of the wall, and the wall panels can fall in or out. Next one. And that's what happened. We lost the diaphragm here, and it buckled in. So here with the large isolated retail building, looking at our original EF scale. Next slide. There we are. DOD 4, long roof spans collapsed downward, 122. But we also have next to it an ETL, or a transmission line that's staying up. So we could use that as an upper bound. So something that doesn't fail can be just as important as something that fails. Next slide. This was the one, I believe, in Joplin that I looked at. All wall panels except for the extreme bottom right were down. Complete loss of the roof diaphragm. There was some toppling of stacks. There were fatalities in here on this building, but it was pretty much on the right edge of the Joplin tornado. Next slide. See where that's at. Complete destruction of the building, DOD 7. So it's about 173 miles an hour. Next slide. Elementary school. This one's down in Glen Heights here. there was very little damage around the area from this tornado, but then all of a sudden I saw these wall panels out, and I went ahead and looked at them, and they were not connected to the structure. They were freestanding wall panels. And then, to make matters even worse, the attachment of the wall to the foundation was nails, no bolts. And this is in Glen Heights, suburb of Dallas. Next slide. And that's what connected the bottom of that wall to the foundation. On the left, you see the little tiny nails, and on the right, little divots in the slab. And again, it wasn't attached to the structure at all. So I made mention of this. The Dallas Morning News got a hold of this, and they ran with it. And boy, did I get flack for this. I'm telling you, I got so much negative press for this thing. And then the school wanted to hire me as a consultant, and I said no. And I gave it to a friend of mine who's not my friend anymore. But yeah, but it's just like I didn't want any part of this. This was really amazing. And it turns out that the company that built this school built 19 other schools in the Dallas area. And when they checked them out, they found the same kind of problems with those schools as well. So this was just scratching the surface of a bigger problem here. But as an engineer, I have to say something, you know? And I did, and it just lit a firestorm. Next slide. And there's your little divot there. Next slide. So we have a couple of things. We have uplift of the of some of the roof decking, which is 101, and then a lower bound for the wall, non-load-bearing walls collapse in 117. So it's probably coastal. All right. Next slide. And then a little more severe damage to school here in Dallas, the Dallas tornado. This is an older school, kind of the one I went to. You know, these older schools, they have these kind of array of windows. You lose those array of windows, and then it lets internal pressure come in and lift off part of the roof, and that's what happened here. However, whoever designed those basketball backstops deserves a medal here, because that went through. We don't have an EF scale for basketball backstops. Okay? But man, that did pretty good. I mean, not bad at all. Next slide. So here we have the window array pushed in. You can actually see where the failure happened. And then the wind got in and then removed the roof panels off of it. Next slide. But this is typical construction, so we can't fault them too much. We have the uplift or collapse of the roof structure is 125 or lower. I do believe it probably was a lower wind speed than that to do that. But that gives you an idea, especially in lieu of the fact that we have the basketball stops there. They're just sitting there fine, ready for the game. Next slide. Here's an office building in Dallas, right on Stemmons, and it's this is actually over on Central, and then it had large window array, blew in, blew off the roof. Next slide. So here we have a DOD5 uplift collapse of the roof structure 133. Next slide. And of course, going back in my older days with the Fort Worth tornado here, we have the Cash America building here, which had a large amount of glass that was removed, and the facade, which was circled here. They had travertine tile on the corners. And wait till you see how they were attached to the building here. You get a kick out of that, and they did lose some of the roof. Next slide. They were actually twisty tied on with a slop of mortar in the back of the stone, and then they twisty tied them on the rebar. So there on the left, you can see the little twisty tie, and on the right, I'm holding the glob of mortar with the twisty tie there, and that's how your travertine stone was attached here on that building. Next slide. All right, so mid-rise building. Next slide. That would be in the 129 to 136 with the curtain walls being broken and partial uplift of the roof. 129 to 136. Next slide. And of course, our high-rise building. This was a beaut. I was going up and I was taking a look at this building, and all of a sudden a piece of glass came out and hit the ground near me, and it was like an explosion. You certainly don't want to be hit by any falling glass from this. This is downtown Fort Worth, 2000 tornado. Next slide. That is part of our high rise and the Mallet Tower here. Lots of glass breakage, and especially when the low rise has gravel. We found out that rocks actually can break glass if you propel them in the wind. Isn't that amazing? It's just, it can happen. Next slide. So, and it turns out about 100 miles an hour. You can walk roof gravel. That happened at the Tandy Center too, by the way. Next slide. Metal roof building system, a metal, entirely metal system. But look at how corroded this was. This was, I think, in Lake Charles. The salt environment down there, it just eats this stuff. This is a stud on the right, near the foundation. It wasn't even connected. The wall was just hanging by the panels. It was eaten up at the bottom so much. So, Hurricane Laura made easy with that. Next slide. And here's the wall panel with the bottom on the right there. Little nails again. Yes, it was nailed. Next slide. That's it. That's all you get. Actually, it was a screw. So, next slide. And there's 78 miles an hour. The next slide. So here's some vehicles. These were non-DIs. They're going to be included in the next version of the EF scale. So that's something that we'll have a table for. Next slide. Now, billboards are going to be included at some time, maybe not the next iteration, but here. I just like this billboard here. This is over on Central. And the billboard says, "Give it a whirl." And that's exactly what the tornado did. It spun it around and tilted it 16 inches off its base. Be careful what you wish for. Next slide. And there's some neat things that we continue to see, but we have no EF scale for. Is a mattress in the tree on the left and the boxcar on the roof on the right. That boxcar was filled with school supplies, desks, and furniture, and it was actually lofted, went almost a half a mile. Next slide. Yeah. So anyways, this just kind of gives you a little bit of idea of where we've been and where we're going to go with this. Like I said, the EF scale is still a work in progress. And it will be a couple of years out before we have the final document out there. There will be a public viewing of it in about a year or so, so watch out for that. There'll be statements out there that you can go ahead and take a look at that. But anyways, that's where we're at. I brought a couple papers in for the office. If you're interested in any of these papers, kind of indicating where we're at, just email me. I've got my business cards there. And I'll send you a PDF copy of those papers. You have it in your digital file. So thank you for the invite. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I know we're running up to the top of the hour here, so we can probably take one or two real quick questions, either here in the room or online.
I got
Those will take them here in the room. All right.
Yeah.
Great, thirsty.
Tim, I've noticed that you've gone to some of the ratings of some of the tornadoes the last 2-3 years, and a lot of people are saying that should have been an EF5, and you've alluded to seeing some things that you are inclined to think that maybe you were there at a 5 level, but then the official rating comes out as a 4. How much interplay do you have with the water coordination meteorologist or whoever at a particular office to input what you think the rating should be?
Well, I get called by the WCMs quite a bit in terms of isolated areas. I think the biggest controversy I've seen over the last couple of years was Mayfield, a long track tornado there. But the Paducah Weather Office actually called in Brian Smith, who and had other teams out there. And I think there were a total of 3 teams of the Weather Service. All of them were unanimous it was a 4. And then they asked me, and I also agreed it was a 4. Part of the problem with Mayfield was it was a fast moving tornado. So the dwell time over a building was very small, only seconds. So it wasn't going to completely wipe a building away. Had it had a little more residence time, like the Gerald tornado could, it's just sat there and over a building and grind it up. Yeah, then it probably could have been rated a 5, but there wasn't anything there. And then the quality construction in rural Kentucky was not very good. Okay, so did we have anything that could withstand, that could give us an upper bound? No. Everything we saw had been damaged and been damaged because usually it was pretty poor construction. So it just couldn't get there because of a number of factors: quality construction, fast moving of a tornado, minimal dwell time, seconds over a building. All that contributes to it.
Yeah, so this is true confessions of an amateur surveyor. You really talk about quality construction and on a number of your DIs, you keep pointing to the low end of the scale. And I've talked to Jen about this a lot, is I find myself challenged to push, really take in a quality construction in the county, push down the rating. And I tell you, that's something I continue to need to work on. I mean, and you almost kind of indicated that sometimes you have to jump all the way down. On 2 or 3 of those there, if I heard you right, you were saying that they just fall completely down one entire rating, given the quality of construction. And I feel like that's something I probably need to do a better job of. I don't want to say inflate numbers, but one of my challenges going forward is to really take the quality of construction into account, because there is a lot of, this is a quick commentary, there is enormous, as you very well, there's enormous pressure, to bring numbers up. I mean, there's both social media as well as EMs, and the residents are there, and everyone's thinking so trying to be objective and be scientific about it, that's obviously what we're there for. So, but my challenge I think my bias is I need to continue to push downward towards a lower bound. And I don't know what your thoughts are about that. I don't know if Jen has any thoughts. I know we've talked a lot about that, but it's continuing to, again, factor in that poor construction and be willing to to really push downward below what you otherwise might consider just on the superficial look of it, So I don't know.
Well, yeah, I'm not really under any pressure by anybody. I mean, to me, I go out there and I just tell it like it is. I mean, if it's right. A 4, it's a 4. When you have to get to a 5, you're talking about what compares with Bridge Creek, what compares with Gerald, what compares with Joplin. Those were the 5s. Is this as bad or worse than those 5s? The answer in Mayfield was no. Okay, so that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the guy who's selling "I Survived EF5" shirts on the corner, I hate to tell him that, but it's just not there. Okay, but that's just the way it is. In order to get to a 5, we have plenty of 5s that we can compare with, and it has to be as bad. Greensburg was one of the first. It was actually the first EF5 tornado on the new scales in 2007. So, and I surveyed that and concurred that it was indeed EF5. It was the highest end tornado. And other tornadoes, Nashville, for example, that happened, that I surveyed, that was not there. Dallas, which I surveyed, that was not there. These were just not 5 level tornadoes, okay? And just that's the way it is. Gerald was one of the worst tornadoes I've ever seen, and that's because of his dwell time being minutes over a building. All right. Not only was it a high-end wind speed, but it just ground up. We don't have dwell time in the EF scale. It's something that is difficult to quantify, and we're really depending on those numerical modelers to come up with some sort of tweak factor, if you will, based on dwell time. It's not happened yet.
Well, thank you. I know.
Yeah, I have some questions.
I noticed there's a whole bunch of questions.
Oh, really?
In the chat.
Oh, chat.
I know we're at the top of the hour, so I'm trying to be cognizant of people's time. So,
I
gosh, I
think
don't
we
know.
can, I mean,
Yeah.
we're fine on our end. I mean, if that's,
All right.
don't worry about
We-
us.
We'll take one or two online real quick, and then we'll wrap up the meeting because I do have chapter business to get to.
Okay.
Usually two or three. Several things, but Crystal asks, when can we expect this to be adopted across the board and be used?
Oh, I wish I had a crystal ball. Not only do we have to get to the draft stage, once we get to the draft stage, then guess what? All the committee members get to go over it again and they get to have corrections. And so that's going to take more time. And once we get past that stage, then it goes for open public comment. So now the public gets to chime in on it, which is all the National Weather Services out there and anybody else that wants to, scientists and all that, and any homeowner, anybody who wants to go in and chime in, we have to address those. And then it has to go into the publication mode, which is basically setting it up for print and getting it proofs and reviewing proofs. If it's out in 2 years, I'll be surprised. And but I've asked the committee as a whole to try to expedite this because I'm not getting any younger. And when I'm on my deathbed, I want to hold up a copy and say, this is my life's work. And leave it up to the next generation to deal with the other issues. And there's other issues involved with this. It's never going to be perfect. We never want it to be perfect because it's never going to be perfect. We know that.
Another one from Daniel. What exactly is the plan on interpreting personal vehicles as a DI, just as an example? Distance moved, damage to the frame, etc.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be whether it moved, shifted, rolled, got flipped, or lofted. Those are all movement types. The things that are not in there yet, but are important, are that the angle that it gets hit by the wind. I mean, it makes a difference whether you get hit broadside or front side. What is going to be there is that the vehicle must be stationary. It cannot have been driving on down the road, for example. So that's also, those are going to be eliminated, but for passenger vehicles. Trucks are not going to be involved with it, just passenger vehicles.
Okay, another one.
Make it the last one.
Okay, you'll make it the last one. This one's a little. Oh, but there's only two left. I'm sure with the release of the new scale in the coming years, could past tornado ratings be revised in the new scale if they seem faulty enough to? Unsure if that was a plan with it, if that, I can't read it, if, or not, besides the fact of using it with present day tornadoes when implemented. And great presentation.
Yeah, actually, that's very true. We had a project that was where Greg Forbes and I were working on the Worcester tornado in Massachusetts from many, many years ago, and wanted to see whether that should be revised on its rating, and so I suspect that maybe some of these tornadoes can be revised. I mean, they've done it with hurricanes, right? They revised some of these hurricanes. So why not? I mean, I think it can be. Certainly, we want to preserve as much of the database as we can historically. There will still be 0 to 5 tornadoes. They're still going to be in the database. It's true we haven't had a 5 in a long time. And so a lot of people are getting very concerned about that. But that's just the way Mother Nature is. I cannot say when the next 5 is going to be.
Hopefully never.
Yeah.
There's only one more, and it's a quick answer.
Okay.
Do you think this scale will eventually be accepted worldwide or just U.S. specifically?
First, let's concentrate on getting it with the U.S., and then we'll see about our friends in Canada and Japan. They have already got the EF scale there. We are actually using some of what they have already. And for example, in Canada, they have the Heritage Church, those big cathedrals. We're pulling that in from Canada. So we'll start with the US, we'll see where it goes from there. I would like to see more universal acceptance of it eventually. If you're in Europe, however, their houses are built different than our houses. So you would have to include the way that they use double width masonry over there, and they build up the gables, and they use heavy corbelled beams with heavy slate and tile roofs. We'd have to include that.
From a quick weather service standpoint, the earlier question about going back and re-rating tornadoes, I'll just, I guess, chime in on our perspective. It's not really a practice that we go back and re-rate tornadoes. I know it's happened with, some hurricanes. There's kind of a time limit on when we can access that database also, but I would think that when the EF scale first came out, we didn't go back and re-rate things that were on the S scale. We use that new data to improve our ratings as we go forward. And that's how I imagine that the new EF scale or EF scale version 2 will work too. It'll help us improve going forward and maybe learn from looking back. But it's usually not a practice to go back and re-rate tornadoes. There's a lot of psychology with that also. So
yeah, the Worcester project that we were involved with was a politically motivated project.
yeah.
So that was the exception rather than the rule. But occasionally somebody in the political system will say, well, this tornado needs to be rated higher. And, I was involved in a committee on that, but that was the exception.
Tim,
Thank you so much. All right, very good.
We appreciate it,
All right.
and because of that, you get one
right.
of these sweet Amazon gift cards from us, from our group.
Great.
So thank you
Appreciate that.
so much for presenting. And so just some quick chapter business for everyone here is first Dave will work on this and make it available online. So if you want to review it later, it'll be there. Just some quick notes about the group this year. Again, we'll be doing all of this at noon, hopefully, or somewhere around the early afternoon. It'll just depend on the date and availability of speakers. Again, the locations will most likely flip between here and the North Central Texas Council of Governments building in Arlington. That's near Six Flags. We will be doing the science fairs again this year, both on Dallas and the Fort Worth side, and that was a lot of fun last year. Enjoyed it. We'll try and get a wide array of speakers for the chapter to cover different aspects of meteorology, maybe even beyond that. Dues, for those being members, it's $10 for, I believe it's still $10. For members, students, grade school, college are free. I'll just use declare your intent, you're in. The next meeting is tentatively October 10th, second Tuesday of the month is when we usually hold our meetings. That is going to be dependent on what the government does by the end of September. Yeah. So that's why I'm going to use the word tentative here. The location will be to be determined. Most likely will be at the Council of Governments building in Arlington. And our speaker that we have lined up is Dr. Ashton Robinson-Cook at the Weather Prediction Center, formerly Storm Prediction Center. Again, also dependent on what the government does, since he is a federal employee. So a lot of TBDs. Anyway, with that, Dave.
Just one item that I'll add. Our website is still down since the AMS system was down earlier this year. They have not restored our chapter website. I did get an email from their admin that they're working on this restoration of actually a whole new system. So our website will be back up sometime. I don't have a date yet, though.
No worries. We'll let the IT folks do their thing there. Stanley, anything on your end?
Yeah, the treasury right now has got $1,008.78 in it. Our budget for this year will be $225 for gift cards and $240 for science fairs, being a total of $505. So we have enough money this year to cover.
That sounds
But we'll
great.
take the dues anyway.
Yeah. Once we get a few more dues in there, we'll be in good shape.
If you need the form, email the mailing list. We'll get your email and we'll send you the form PDF directly, because the form is on the website.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we can take care of it.
Yeah, we can also work on just sending an email out as well to the listener. So All right. Anything else? So I think meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much. Thank you online. See you all next time.
Thanks, everybody, for so many of you joining. There was something like 43 participants.